Hi, everybody. Welcome to our program today. This is David Nevins for Citybiz List, and glad you could join us. Our guest today is Jonathan Schochor of Schochor and Staton Law Firm in Baltimore City, one of the recognized leaders in Maryland and beyond, particularly as it relates to sexual abuse cases, which certainly of late have been in the news. Jonathan, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
The pleasure's ours. So as I mentioned, Jonathan, this has been in the news quite a bit of late, and I believe it is primarily because Maryland Governor Wes Moore recently signed the Child Victims Act into law, which eliminates the statute of limitations on sexual abuse cases brought forth in the form of civil lawsuits in the state of Maryland. So quite a mouthful there. Could you explain what that means to Marylanders, and certainly, even more importantly, to the victims of past sexual abuse?
Certainly. The law is monumental. It represents a very significant victory for victims of sexual abuse in Maryland. What the law does essentially is lifts the statute of limitations. It eliminates the statute of limitations so that victims of sexual abuse in Maryland have an opportunity now, regardless of when it happened, to move forward, come forward, and enforce their rights in a civil law setting. And so, there's been some confusion, David. Let me just add this, because there's been some confusion about the breadth of the depth and the breadth of the law. The law does not just simply involve the clergy or the archdiocese. This law removes the statute of limitations for all victims of sexual abuse in Maryland, regardless. For example, if it was a prison guard or a teacher in a public school, or a teacher in a private school, or a coach, or a scoutmaster who's guilty of sexual abuse, those victims may move forward now and enforce their claims in the civil litigation setting.
So, Jonathan, when I introduced you and your firm as among the leaders in this regard, and I think that's at least partly the result of an historic settlement that you and your colleagues won for sexual abuse survivors in recent years. So can you tell our audience about that case?
Certainly. That case involved an OBGYN who was videoing and taking photographs of his female patients' genitalia, if you will, without permission, and was guilty of other boundary violations as well at the Johns Hopkins Hospital. I spearheaded that litigation, crafted the complaint, moved forward with that case, and was the chairman of the steering committee and represented approximately 8,000 women who were victims of this sexual abuse. And after months and months of going through the legal machinations, if you will, folks, and mediations and everything else involved in this litigation, we settled it for $190 million, which at that time represented the largest single sexual abuse perpetrator case in the nation's history at that time, and is still reported to be the largest sexual abuse settlement in Maryland history. I was proud to spearhead that litigation from inception to conclusion and have such a wonderful result for the victims involved. And I said nearly 8,000.
Quite significant indeed. Jonathan, could you, this is not, these are civil cases, which is different than criminal cases. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but walk us through. So a lot of people are going to be watching this interview, and sadly, I would imagine some of them may very well be victims of past sexual abuse. Walk us through what the process might be like for someone who reaches out to to your firm or to you directly?
Certainly. As I said, the victims victims of sexual abuse have their civil rights. So they would contact us at Schochor and Staton. They can do that through the website or through telephone number if I'm permitted to give it, but in any
Sure.
event, they will contact us. We will take them by the hand, explain the entire process in this civil litigation, protect their anonymity to the fullest extent of the law if they so desire, and have a confidential meeting with them to explain the process. And you said this is a civil litigation, it's not criminal, and you're absolutely correct in that analysis. In a criminal prosecution, you have to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the level of proof that you must meet as a burden in order to prevail, beyond a reasonable doubt. In this setting, the civil setting, you only have to prove your case by a preponderance of the evidence. And people always ask me, well, what does that mean? And I explain to them as a rough analogy, if you will, that if you took a football setting, most people would think in order to win, you would have to cross the goal line and take the football into the end zone. That would be the analogy for a criminal prosecution. For a civil action, such as we are involved in, we only have to cross the 50-yard line to prevail. The level of proof is lower.
So a very significant difference. What would you like to say? I mean, I know you've had, so again, correct me if I'm wrong, this law, first of all, doesn't take effect until October 1st, 2023. And
Right.
we're speaking in late May in this regard. I mean, what message would you like to put out there to people who feel they are the victims of past sexual abuse in terms of what should they think about and how should they proceed? And I guess a lot of them are also thinking, maybe I should just figure out a way to get past this. I don't want to, stir things up. So I know you get a ton of calls in this regard. How do you advise these folks?
Well, just as with the Hopkins case, as an example, and other cases we've been involved in, I find that the victims of sexual abuse are reticent at first. They're reluctant to come forward. Many of them, when this occurred, went to their families or they went to the church to try and get resolution, but not the authorities. My advice to the victims is call us. We have experience in this. We've interviewed thousands of sexual abuse clients of ours. Once we explain the process, explain that we can protect their anonymity if they wish. Some people don't want to be protected, but others do. They want to be a John or a Jane Doe. They don't want their name out there. Fine. We can protect their anonymity. They also learn in these interviews that we are a contingency fee-based law firm. And that means they have no financial obligation up front. Many people don't have the financial wherewithal to undertake this massive litigation. They can't hire people of our skill level because they don't have the financial backing. They don't need any financial backing. You folks listening, if your victims come forward, call us. You don't have to pay a nickel, not a penny, unless we prevail, and then we get a legal fee out of the compensation, not out of your pocket, meaning at the beginning. And so once we explain all of this and the fact that everything they say to us is strictly confidential, it's not going to be published. Once we explain all of this to the victims, we found again that 8,000 women came forward in the Hopkins case alone. So once they can digest that, once they understand that this compensation can put programs in place to help them that they otherwise financially would not have the ability to do. Counseling, psychiatric help, psychological help, group therapy, anything that's necessary to help these folks gain closure, get some emotional stability. importantly hold those accountable for the horrendous acts, we have found that we were really able to assist and help these victims.
I know, very articulately put, I might add. I know that Maryland, you alluded to this earlier, Maryland, again, and maybe you could be slightly more specific, is at the forefront. This law, I don't think is the only such one in the country that eliminated the statute of limitations, but certainly is one of the earlier ones. And would you say this has been, despite the fact that it applies to victims, as you said, of abuse, no matter whom that abuse was caused by, was it triggered by the Attorney General and the Archdiocese report? How did we get to where we are today in Maryland?
It's an excellent question, and you're absolutely correct, David. The reason we're sitting here today having this interview is that the Attorney General undertook an investigation of the Archdiocese of Maryland and published a 454 or 64-page report indicating essentially, in a few words, because we don't have the time, that there have been roughly 80 years of sexual abuse in the Archdiocese. And the report estimated, really guesstimated, that there were approximately 600 victims. In my experience, having been at the bar for 50 years, half a century now, and I'm still hopefully going strong. There's not 600 victims. There are thousands of victims over an 80-year period. And as I said before, it's not just the Archdiocese, but of course it's all victims, all abusers. So the report was so egregious with respect to the conduct of the Archdiocese, because it was not only that there was sexual abuse, which is the number one principal part of this, but there was conduct reported in this report that the Archdiocese, instead of doing something about it at the outset, was simply taking some of the clergy and moving them, playing a shell game. All right, if it wasn't any good in Baltimore, let's move them to Cleveland and see what happens. Well, what do you think happened? And so the legislature was so taken aback, in my opinion, can't speak for them, but I can only observe, which I did. They were so taken aback by what happened here that they passed legislation lifting that statute of limitations, not only against the Archdiocese, but all sexual abusers of Maryland. And that was the triggering event. There is no question in my mind.
Good to know. Good to know. And here we are. And so, Jonathan, I think we're more or less out of time. But again, to any folks out there who are either themselves sexual abuse victims or who have family members or friends who fall into that category, how does someone reach out to you? And just to be clear, they can reach out to any attorney who has expertise in this field. But this is your area of expertise. So how does someone find you at Schochor and Staton?
Very simple process, folks. Pick up the telephone, 410-234-1000. 410-234-1000, or go to our website at sfspa.com. sfspa.com. You can go to our website and contact us, and there are other means to contact us via the social media platforms, if you will. You can find us. Please do. We can, support you. In my experience, I found out we're a pretty good support group. These victims love to talk to us. We love to talk to them. We have some of our clients telephoning us every week, every other week. What's going on? Really, they want to talk, and they were comfortable with us. Other clients want to come in and do a face-to-face just for a status update. It's really spending time and discussing what happened and trying to get them moving toward more emotional stability and to be more functional in society, frankly. And so my advice would be to get on the website, get on the telephone, come forward, and don't forget, if some of these folks have moved out of Maryland, because we get this question all the time, what if we moved out of Maryland? Can we still pursue our claim if it occurred in Maryland? Absolutely. If you live in West Virginia, Virginia, California, it doesn't matter where you live. Call. And we have a toll-free number, but I don't remember what it is.
I'm sure they will find you. I'm sure they will find you. Jonathan, thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. And if you'd like to follow up at any time, pray God I'm available. Take care.
Our guest, thank you. Our guest today has been Jonathan Schochor, founding partner and chairman of Schochor and Staton Law Firm in Baltimore City. And thank you for watching. This is David Nevins for Citybiz List, and we'll see you again next time.